Hello, hello, good morning. It's Monica from Life is Art, and this is the Sunday 10 a.m. technique at the Pet Parade online crop. And this is our final day of the crop. We are going to be looking at fish and exotic pets today. Thursday, we looked at pets with fur and hair. Friday, we looked at pets with feathers. Then Saturday was, drawing a blank now. Saturday was, what was Saturday? That was just yesterday. Oh my goodness. So long ago. Um, well, anyway, today we're doing fish and exotic pets, and it'll come back to me what we were looking at yesterday. Oh my goodness. If any of you uh, could let me know in the comments and refresh my memory, that would be awesome. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching later on replay, you can say replay. I see Mary is here. Good morning. Mary, what kind of animals were we looking at yesterday? We did we did the feathery stuff on Friday. We did furry and hairy things on Thursday, and Saturday was, I can't remember. Oh my gosh, my brain has taken a blank. Anyway, today we're looking at fish and exotic pets, and I wanted to do a fun technique, and this is actually a technique that I have shown you before, but it was probably 3 years ago. And I just did a recent technique demo for the um, the demonstrator group that I'm a part of, and I thought I would share it here today because it is a really, really good technique, and it's kind of one of those messy techniques that is less intimidating for people who don't really like the unpredictableness of the mixed media and messy stuff. So, for those of you who like to do your messy, unmessy, or unmessy, messy, where you do stamping with splatters and things to keep everything under control, you will appreciate this technique. So, this technique is something relating to smooshing. So, some people call it smooching because it's often referred to as a kissing technique where you apply your inks to a non-porous surface, sometimes a piece of acetate or something, or even onto your glass mat, and then you take your paper and you dip it into it, or you take the acetate and you dip it all over your paper. And it's unpredictable. You get what you get when you do things like that. So today we're going to take a little bit of the unpredictableness out of it. We're going to give you a little more control over the process, and we're going to set boundaries. So I call this technique targeted smooshing. And just recently, my family did a bit of a staycation. Hey, good morning, Heather. We did a staycation, and we went to an archery place, and we did some archery, and we had to shoot at the target. Now, this was kind of interesting because they had a program, a digital program. And so instead of just having a, I don't want to say sedentary, but having a static target that's just stuck on the wall, it was actually all digitalized. So the targets were moving and there was different things to shoot at. So it really took the whole thing up a notch. And for beginners like us, it was fun because if we missed, it was just because it was more interactive, and that was okay. But it also might have been a greater challenge because you weren't always trying to aim at the exact same spot. So you couldn't kind of get used to where you needed to go, always doing the same thing. So this is going to be one of those things where you get used to where you're going to go. We're targeting a specific spot, and we're going to keep it simple for you. Right, Mary. Reptiles and amphibians. I knew there was something yesterday. I was thinking like scales, but I knew that wasn't quite right. Yesterday was reptiles and amphibians. Thank you. I'm losing my mind. Anyway, so we're going to start with this technique by choosing our non-porous surface. And for today's technique, I like to use a stamp block. And I like to use a stamp block we're going to do a card to show you this technique, but this technique can work on other surfaces as well. So you want to choose a block for the method that I'm doing today, or the example that I'm showing. I'm choosing a block that is longer than the area I want to cover. Okay, now I have cut my piece of basic white cardstock to 4 inches by 5 1/4. So it's just a little bit smaller than an A2 or a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card size. Good morning, Allison. And so we're going to be using our stamp block. Now I could use, if I wanted to create a different shape, I could use a different size block. I could even use a narrower block. Maybe I want to make a series of targeted smooshings, or just a little tiny bit of targeted smooshing. But for what I want to do, it's going to be kind of the highlight of my project. And so I'm going to use a fairly wide, long block. And I'm going to flip it over so I'm using the side where I would normally put the stamps. Okay. For this method, I'm going to choose 3 colors, and I want to choose colors that play well with each other. I don't know if you've ever done ink blending or smooshing, and you've put together ink colors, and when you were done, you were like, ugh, those colors do not go well together. Whether just the mix of the 2 colors, one on top of the other, just creates mud, and that's not what you were going for, or whatever it is about them. They just don't go well with each other. So you want to kind of play around with this technique. Just take some scrap cardstock and play around and find the combinations of 3. I like to do 3 inks. And usually you want to have 1 ink that's sort of your main color, 1 that's maybe a shade darker than that, and then 1 that's a contrast. And that seems to be a good combination. So if you choose yellow as your main color, then you might choose an orange to be the shade just above, because yellow and orange are related. And then you might choose something like a green as a contrast, or a blue or something. So today, for what I want to do, I'm going to kind of do a subtle color mix. And this is one I did as an example when I was doing this for the demonstrators. I'm going to start with Moody Mauve. Then as my shade darker, I'm going to use Blackberry Bliss. So you can see that those 2 colors are very similar, but they are tonally different. One is much darker. And then as a contrast, I'm going to use Basic Gray. And if you are, a colory, mixy person, you know that sort of mauve and maroony colors look really good with gray. So kind of think about clothing that you like, that you think looks well together. And those are usually color combinations that will usually, I don't say always, usually look okay together as inks. It just depends, because sometimes inks have chemical compositions that just don't jive with each other, and there's nothing you can do about it. Even maybe the colors would be perfectly fine together, but just the chemical makeup of the ink, they just don't work. Sometimes you find that with alcohol markers. If you color something with one color and then you color over top and you think it should be fine, and they just repel each other or do some weird reaction, and you're like, oh, that's it goes all grainy or something. It's just the chemicals that are in them, and there's nothing you can do about that. So we're going to start with the Moody Mauve after all that talking. And what I want to do is I want to kind of think about the size of where I'm going and think about thirds, because I'm going to kind of generally go in thirds. Although my first color, that main color, the Moody Mauve that I'm picking, usually the lightest color of the 3, is going to go in the center, and there'll probably be more of it than the other two colors. So if you're looking at the Stampin' Up! Ink pads, when you open your ink pads, you're going to notice that one end has this little gully where you can put the sticker that shows what color it is, because let's be honest, when your ink pads are open, let me show you. If your ink pads are open and sitting on your desk, those colors look the same. So it's nice to have that little sticker, and the stickers are always stuck on the back when you first get them. There will be one that doesn't even have any words, but it has a color, and you can stick that down in the gully, and then when they're open, you can tell which ink is which. But when you want to do a technique where you're going to try and transfer ink from your ink pad to, say, your mat or onto a block, don't use the end where the gully is, because there's too much of a gap between the end of your ink block and where the edge of the ink pad is. Turn it around, and this end, where the hinge is much closer to the edge. Okay, so you're going to be able to steer it and be in control much better. So I always pick my block up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to run my ink up and down, and I can even do it a couple of times. I can even tap my ink, however you want to do it to get ink on there. You're going to apply ink in the center portion, and if I set it on top of there, you're going to see the ink a little better. Okay? Don't matter if there's lines. It's fine. We're going to add water to this because we're smooshing. It's going to get a little messy, but we're going to control it. Okay. Oh, Diane says she can't get on. The browser can't play the video. Huh. So you can comment, but you can't see. That's weird. I'm not sure what. Maybe try going out and refreshing and coming back in. Close it down and come back in. So the Moody Mauve is what we've put on first. Then we're going to come in with the Blackberry Bliss. Again, we're going to turn it around so we've got that nice narrow end. This time I'm going to apply this above where I did, and I'm going to start away and slide up to the other ink. I don't necessarily want to go into that other ink, but I'm going to come up to it. Okay, and you can definitely tell that's a darker color. All right. Now, because this is a darker color, if it does touch and it picks up a little of that Moody Mauve, it's not going to make a huge difference. If I took a lighter color and got it into one of these dark colors, then that might be an issue. All right, so now we've done our Moody Mauve, our Blackberry Bliss. We're coming in with our basic gray. Yes, Janet, that's a good idea. Try going into YouTube and then going to my channel and clicking on the live video. All right, so now we're going to come to the other end, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just lightly rub that basic gray on here, up and down. And I do tend to try and sort of end by going towards the first bit of ink, because that puts kind of a little bit of a extra bit of ink right at the end, because you're kind of pushing it along. And, you know, in between the inks is where we want it all to kind of blend together and get all smooshy gushy. All right, now that we've got that on there, we don't have to rush because we're going to add water. So if this starts to dry, don't worry, we're going to add water to it. That's going to liven it all back up. I'm going to take my little water sprayer. This is a Stampin' Up! One. What do they call it? A Stampin' Spritzer. We're going to take our Stampin' Spritzer, and I kind of pick my block up a little bit just so I can not have it flat, because the spritzers don't really work when you're down flat. You got to kind of do it up on an angle. But I'm not lifting it even 45 degrees, more like 20 degrees. And then we're just going to gently spray across, okay, until you see a really good layer of water where it all starts to, let me hold it over the paper so you can see, where it all starts, you can't really see those lines where you did the inking. And then you're going to do a little bit of tipping. You're going to tip it sideways, and the other side, you're going to go back, you're going to go forth, and that's going to allow the transitions between the colors to kind of blend together and get a little mushy gushy. Don't tip it so far that it's going to run off the edge. We don't want it running away from us. But what we want to do, and I'm going to kind of explain it, then I'm going to do it. We're going to keep our paper over here. Then we're going to take our block and we're going to flip it right over in one swift move. And if we flip it right over and hold it parallel to our surface, it's actually not going to drip, even though there's a decent amount of water. You can even see it puddling there. There's a decent amount of water on here. Now, I've been talking for a long time, so it's running all over the place. But we're going to flip it, and then we're going to bring it over to our paper and line it up where we want it, set it down, and then we're going to slide it vertically up and down a couple times, like that, and then take it away. And then we need something to kind of clean ourselves off here, because there's still ink, there's still liquid on there. It doesn't all get absorbed into the paper. And you will see my paper is starting to curl up. That's okay, no worries. We're just going to clean off our block. And if you have a block that has a positioning line, you're going to want to just kind of run a fingernail down in there with the tissue to clean that up. You can use your stamp chamois for that. You can use whatever you want. And then clean up all the wetness that we created. You may want to clean that block a little more. You never know. And now we need to let this dry. But we're an impatient people. At least I am an impatient people. And so I'm just going to roll up my mat here. Set it aside. And bring in my heat gun. Now, you could actually use like a hairdryer for this, but I have a heat gun in my craft room. And so we're just going to heat it to help it dry. And we're going to help it dry on both sides because our paper has kind of saturated. And if we only bake it on one side, it's going to curl a lot. But if we bake it on both sides, that's what we call it, we're baking it, it'll help it straighten out. Like even there, you can see how the curl is coming out as I heat it. It was curled almost 45 degrees. And if I heat it on the back, it's going to curl again. See that? But then when I heat it on the front, it's magic. It's just because the fibers in the paper are doing their thing. Okay, so that's getting there. It's not 100% dry. But we're going to set it aside. But you can see how we targeted our smooshing. And now instead of having messy everywhere, willy-nilly, we have a distinct area that we have added smooshing to. And I love how the colors have run together and created that kind of swirly goodness happening there. Isn't that gorgeous? Yes, Diane, reptiles. Hello, you made it in. Awesome. So I'm going to do some stamping from the Hearts and Hugs stamp set that we used yesterday with this little guy down here, the one that we could use as a hamster or a guinea pig or a quokka. And I'm actually going to do these walruses because I think these walruses are just absolutely cute. And so I've got a piece of basic white cardstock that I hope is actually big enough. Yeah, we'll do it on an angle. We'll stamp them on an angle. And I've got my walruses. I guess that's plural. Walrusi. It must be walruses. I'm gonna ink them up with the Tuxedo Black Memento ink. Like that. And then just go ahead and stamp that onto the basic white. Lovely. Put that away. And we're going to do some coloring on this. The other thing that I'm going to be using, why do I have that there? No, I'm not going to be using that. The other thing I'm going to be using is some of my Stampin' Blend markers. I'm going to be using the light gray granite and the dark gray granite, as well as the light pretty in pink. And for something else on this project, I'm going to be using the black Stampin' Right marker. Oops, my video has kind of stalled on my screen. Has it stalled for anybody else? Let me just refresh it. And if you could let me know in the comments whether the video is working for you, that would be great. Seems to have come back. Heather says it's going, so we will continue on. Awesome. Okay, so we've got our little walruses here, and we're going to come in with the light gray granite. Now, yesterday when we were doing our little critter here, I was talking about how he's very floofy, right? He's got the hairy floofiness, and so we colored in little tiny circles to make him have an extra little bit of floof. Well, walruses, or walrusi, or whatever you want to call them, are not floofy. They're not. So we're going to use a different coloring technique for this. So we're going to come in with our light gray granite, and we're going to just kind of work in areas. So first we just did that little bit around his head. And you'll notice he's got some little blubber, some little rolls. It's okay. He's supposed to have them. We're not shaming him. He needs that because he lives in very cold waters. So that's protection. It's insulation. I have a lot of it myself. So we're going to kind of start there. But notice how these lines are going like this. That is going to guide our coloring. And then in this little area between his tusks, we can just go ahead and color that. The trick with coloring with markers or pencil crayons or anything like that is that you want it to look natural. And if you just kind of color this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, what's going to happen is you're going to get overlapping lines, and you will have like dark spots and light spots in places where you don't really want them. So we're going to color sort of in sections and kind of make it make sense with the animal that we're coloring. Now he's got these nice little cheekies here. We're going to go ahead and just kind of color around the outside of those. And where he's got the little dots here, we're going to kind of leave an empty space where we can do a little bit of coloring with a different color. We're also going to do his little bottom lip there. Okay, now we're going to turn because we have these little rolls. He's proud of his little rolls, keeping him comfy and safe. And we're going to work with those shapes to color him in, but our hand, if you're a right-handed person, naturally arcs like this. So instead of fighting against it and trying to force yourself to arc this way, which is unnatural, just turn your little critter around, and we're going to work this way. Now I'm going to start by adding just kind of a line along there to mark our edge. And then we're going to start coming in with little arcs. And it doesn't even matter if we leave little spaces because we're going to come in with a different color, a couple different colors. So we're going to go in arcs like that. When we get to his arm, we're going to have a little bit darker at the bottom where there's going to be a shadow. And then we'll go with those curves the other way. And then we're going to continue on down his back. And he's going to look a little bit zebra-ish. And that's okay because we're going to fix that and add a little bit of dark at the bottom. Okay, so let me lift that up so you can kind of see. So you see how it looks kind of odd because we've left blank spaces. Don't worry about it. We're gonna keep working on that. Mary says the video's going fine. So does Janet. Awesome. All right, now let's go over to our other little guy. We'll do the same thing. We'll kind of leave a little bit of space on his little cheekies here. We'll color in between the tusks. I think this might be the her because it's smaller tusks. And then we'll kind of do around the head. And you can see as I'm doing this that I'm fighting against that curve. I'm trying to go the opposite way. So now that I've done those little details, I'm going to turn around so that the curve of my hand is going to work with what's here. Okay, so we'll add that line down there and a little bit across the bottom so we know where to stop coloring. And then we're going to just go ahead and do our swoopy lines, coloring in this side. And you can do it as quick or as slow as you want, whatever you're comfortable with. There we go. And then we can also do this little flipper here. And this little flipper here. Nice! Then we're going to come in with the dark of the gray granite. Yes, gray granite. I always got to double check. We're going to come in with the dark. So now we got to think where there's shadows. So there's going to be shadows on the edge of the cheeks. I'm envisioning some light coming from over here, kind of from above. So there'll be a little bit of dark on the cheeks, under the chin, probably in between the tusks, in between there, maybe even along behind this tusk, and kind of where we did in the separation in between them. That one's a little bit in behind. Then, you know, around some of the little rolls, we're going to get that. And so we'll just add a little bit of shadowing here and there. And then we're going to come around the bottom because there's going to be darker spots there. Bottom of the flipper, bottom there. This whole flipper is kind of in the shadows, so we'll do a lot on there. And there we go. But now we're going to add a little bit more. So we're going to come, again, following the curve of our hand. Not as solid as we did with the other color, but we're going to add some dark lines there. And we'll add some curved dark lines here, just to kind of blend it all in. I didn't really curve those ones very well, but that's okay. We get the idea. All right, and then we're going to come in with our pretty in pink. And for this, we're going to color his nice little cheekies. And then we'll add some color to the top, you know, where the sunset or the sunrise might be kind of hitting them. You know, we'll give them a healthy pink glow here and there, like that. We'll do the same on the other side because they're just so cute and lovey-dovey. You know, they can have a little bit of a glow to them. They're in love. And then I'm going to come back in with the dark and just add some to their little noses. We're going to darken up their noses like that. And that's it. That's all we need to do for our little walruses, other than we're going to fussy cut them out. So let's start at one side. I didn't even rough cut. We're just going to go to it. And we're going to leave a halo of that basic white cardstock. There we go. All the way around. We're going to pivot our paper. And this is actually a really easy one to fussy cut. There's really not a lot of, you know, in and out or detail. You're just kind of following the outside shape. You can go a little bit lumpy on the lumps. Woo! That shot right across my table. And around their heads. Oh my gosh, walruses. So cute. Not that I would want to be up close and personal with one, but I think they just look so lovey-dovey here. There we go. Easy fussy cutting. All right, now let's bring in our card base. And look how cool that is looking. What we want to do with this is we want to, just like we used our stamp block to create boundaries for where we were targeting our smooshing, we're going to create some boundaries with our black marker. So I'm going to use the nib tip, and I'm also going to use a ruler, because we're just going to add a little bit of stylizing to this. And I'm going to line it up on my mat so I have some lines to kind of keep me straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find where most of the edge is. You will see that this edge is not even, so we're going to try and even it up a little bit. So I'm going to move to where the most reasonable place is to start a line. And then I'm just going to draw a line with my Stampin' Right black marker. I'm going to scooch over a hair, and I'm going to draw a second line, and all that's going to do is to help make a thick line. That's all we're doing. We're making a thicker line. Then I'm going to turn this around, line it up again, and then I'm going to move my ruler to where it makes the most sense to start my line so that most of it is contained. One line, scooch, scooch, just a hair. We're not being dramatic. We don't want a double line. We want a double thick line. And there we have now created some borders, you know, like we talk about. We need to set boundaries. Now, one thing I will tell you is when you use a marker with a ruler, you're going to want to give it a little bit of a wipe down with a chamois or something, because you're going to leave marker residue on your ruler. And if you come along later and try to use your ruler, you might stick it down on your card or something and transfer that marker. So always give your ruler a little brush off when you've used it with a marker. That's my helpful tip for the day. So then you can take your paper, and it's mostly dry now, and you can kind of just give it a little massage to make it lay a little flatter. But when we stick it onto our card base, which we're doing right now, we've got a card base that is 8.5 by 5.5, and it's been scored in the middle at 4 1/4. We're going to fold it with the bump side to the inside, like so. Give it a crease. When we stick it down to this card, we're just going to use a little extra adhesive to make sure that we hold it down as flatly and cleanly as possible. And the drier it is before you do this, the better, because then it's less likely to transfer moisture to your card base. So we're going to come in with extra adhesive. I don't normally put this much adhesive on a panel that's going on a card, but when we've gotten it wet and it's a little warpity, then this is warranted. All right, I'm going to use my take your pick tool to just take those backings off. And remove them all. And then we're going to center this on the front of our card. Now, you may also notice that some of the ink comes through a little bit. That's why I don't do this technique right on my card base. Plus, the card base is going to be the stabilizing force for this panel that may have a little bit of bend to it. But there we go. I love this variation. I will show you one I made earlier that has even a little more because I didn't put quite as much water on it, and I didn't stand around talking as much. Sit around talking while I was getting it ready. So we've got our stamped fussy cut colored image, but we're also going to do some stamping on here to add our sentiment. And there's a bit of technique with this too. I'm using, again, the Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I'm going to bring in sentiments from this stamp set. And I'm going to start with Sending a Big Hug, which is right here. We're going to load that up, and we're going to stamp right on our there's a little piece of paper stuck to that. We're going to stamp right on our card, and sometimes that can be intimidating. I'm going to scooch it a little bit closer to me. We're going to ink up our sentiment, and we're going to stamp right into this panel that we created. So I've got Sending a Big Hug. Now let me just grab my Stampin' scrub. I'm going to throw a little water on there so I can wash my stamp. Scrubby, 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 scrubby. And peel that off. And then I'm going to add the sentiment so it's there when you need it. But if you take a look at this sentiment, it's too wide for the panel that I want. My video has stopped again. Really weird. I must have a bad connection online today. So it's there when you need it. I want to stamp that in 2 parts, which involves some masking. And there's a couple ways I could do that. I could take my sticky note and I could stick it on my paper and line it up and then ink this up and then stamp and keep that on there and then peel it off. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stick it right on my stamp. So I'm going to use the sticky side of the sticky note to stick it. So I've just got the "so it's there." I don't know if you can see that. That has not been covered by the sticky note. I can even wrap it around and hold it if I want. Then I'm going to ink this up so that my "so it's there" is inked. Take that away. Now this side should be clean. And then I can just stamp "so it's there." Then we're going to wash our stamp. This is why we got out the Stampin' scrub. Scrub on the wet, scrub on the dry. And then we're going to take our sticky note and we're going to cover up the part that we just stamped. Like that. We're going to ink up the other side. Yep. Take the mask away. Always take the mask away, otherwise you're just going to make a mess. And then we're going to stamp the second half of our sentiment. So now we've got that whole big sentiment on there. Quick and easy. Those little Post-it notes come in handy for all sorts of things. I always have as you can see, I always have a good supply of Post-it notes. And then once you're done stamping like this, just let it dry and you can use it for writing a message. Waste not, want not. So now we have "sending a big hug, so it's there when you need it" stamped onto our card front. Then let's add some dimensionals to the back of our little walruses. I suppose technically they're big walruses, but they're little and cute. There we go. You can take the backings off. So let me know in the comments, have you done targeted stamping before? I know it's been a long time. Probably, like I said, probably 3 years since I showed that technique last. And we'll just line our little walruses up there. And then let's also bring in some bling bling. So I have here the adhesive-backed rainbow dots. And there's lots of fun colors on here, but I'm thinking that these pink ones probably look really nice with the mauve and the Blackberry Bliss. So let's add a little trio of these there and there, and we'll stick one over here by our sentiment to kind of highlight that. Put the cover back on that. And there we have, it's a very simple card, but really cute. And we use that technique of the targeted smooshing to create that gorgeous blended background. It's a different look from just blending with a brush and ink. And it's one of those ones where you just play with it. Just do a whole bunch and you'll find ones that you love. And then we added our line around with our Stampin' Right marker. We stamped out our walrus from that Sending Hugs stamp set, or sorry, Hearts and Hugs, and adding it to our card base. We used our Stampin' Blend markers for coloring and those rainbow adhesive-backed dots, doing our masking so we can get our whole sentiment on the front. We could, of course, have added some of it on the inside, but I kind of like it all there on the front. I'll show you the one that I was working on the other day. And you'll notice the top looks fairly similar, but at the bottom it gets kind of grainy, and that's because there was a little less water sprayed and I didn't wait as long. So this one I waited a little longer and it got a really beautiful blend. This one I was a little bit impatient and I just went ahead, and I like both looks. I think both looks will work really well for different things too. But it's kind of one of those, even though it's predictable, even though we've set boundaries, even though we're targeting with our smooshing, there is variation. And that's okay. So there is still that feel of unpredictableness with mixed media, but you definitely have more control with your targeted smooshing. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that technique and the masking technique and the coloring technique. And if you create a card like this using this targeted smooshing, please take a picture of it and post it in the comments where I post my photos, and then we can all see and be inspired by your artwork as well. Hope you have a great rest of the morning. We will be on at 11:30 for Chat and Craft. We'll see you then. Toodaloo. Bye.